So, Jordan Blair is the owner of the Dreamful podcast. She's a magnificent storyteller with a dreamful voice that is bound to enchant and engage any listener. Jordan's content creation and consistency with sharing interesting and classic stories are second to none. Not to mention, Jordan has a background in art, writing, and theater, and public libraries. Woohoo! Jordan's podcast can be heard on many of the podcasting platforms available, and including her website, dreamfulstories.com. And we will try to get that in the chat. I think it's on the screen. Let's see. Okay. Oh, no, it's not on the screen, but we will get that in chat. Okay, and we're going to move on to Krystal Proffitt. Krystal Proffitt is the host and owner of the Proffitt podcast, where entrepreneurs go to learn how to start, launch, and market their podcasts. Krystal has built a great presence on YouTube and on Facebook, starting a Facebook group called the Proffitt Podcast Online Community. I'm a member, and I'm so happy to be a member. It's amazing to see Krystal's passion and consistency for helping others in the podcast community. She's also the author of the Amazon bestseller, Start a Binge-Worthy Podcast. Krystal's podcast can be heard on many of the podcasting platforms as well, including her website, krystalproffitt.com. So with that being said, we'll take a quick listen for Podcast Jukebox. Remember, we're going to do some critical listening to these podcasts, and we won't do a share out, but we'll segue right into Krystal and Jordan's portion. We'll listen to a few minutes of Jordan's podcast called Tom Wolfe and the Max Owl. So I'm going to go to her website. Give me 1 sec while I get there. And let me just make sure sound is enabled. Okay, share sound. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start playing it, and we're a few minutes in, but give me a thumbs up if you can hear the audio.
Without further ado, enjoy the story of Tom Wolfe and Max the Owl. So, snuggle up in your blankets and have sweet dreams. Once upon a time, in the beautiful countryside where there are rolling green hills, large leafy trees, and the bluest sky, was a farm with a thatched roof. In one of the fields, there was a huge beech tree that provided shade to the farm. It was also the home of the wisest of all the animals, Max the Owl, who watched over the farm from its top branches. On the farm lived the most amazing animals, all different and special in their own way, including 4 sheep, 6 pigs, 12 cows, 2 horses, 1 owl, whom you've already met, and the newest addition to the farm, a little puppy called Woof, Thomas Wolfe. Even though all the animals lived together, they didn't get along and fought with each other all the time. The cows grumbled moo at the sheep. The sheep bleated complaining baas. The pigs meanly oinked at the chickens. The chickens were always clucking, cluck cluck at the horses. And as for the horses, well, they did not speak to anyone who wasn't a horse. But even though they didn't get along with each other and were always fighting, they agreed on one thing. The new addition to the farm, Thomas Wolfe, was a very naughty puppy. Tom Wolfe, the puppy, was a writer. He was always writing on everything. He wrote on the walls of the stables. He wrote on the fences in the fields. He wrote on the roof of the coop where the chickens slept last night.
All right, can we give a virtual Zoom round of applause for Jordan and Tom? That was amazing. We're going to segue into one of Krystal's that focuses on consistency, and I thought this was really, really cool. So round 2, podcast jukebox. Let's take it away. And
hey, David, is there any way you can increase the volume on your computer? Yeah, it's.
Oh gosh, let's see.
It might be better on this one. Maybe we should see how it goes.
That's true.
Yeah, my volume's up all the way.
I'm super loud on mine, so I'm like, I don't want anybody to get like, oh my gosh, it's so loud. So
mine's just fine on volume too.
Okay, but what we'll do is when we get further in, I'm gonna drop the links. I'll try to drop links for these in chat so you can listen. But so good! I can't wait to share Krystal's right now. So let's give that a try. Okay, here we go.
Consistent, because that is what we're talking about today. We are talking about consistency, how to make it happen, how to make that work. So all the things that we talk about today, you can find in the show notes, krystalproffitt.com/episode 237. But I just really wanted to talk to you about why consistency means so much to me. So recently I had a great conversation with someone from our podcast community, and they just told me flat out the reason why they come back to me over and over again for podcast advice, business tips, and motivation whenever they're really ready to just give up on their podcast and quit is because I'm so consistent. And I'm not telling you this to kind of toot my own horn, but I will say that this is something that was intentional for me. I want to be known as someone who is consistent. I don't want to be flaky. I don't want to be someone that they're just like, oh, we just can't really depend on her. So she's not going to be the person that we look to every single time. Like we have a podcast question, or we want to know about marketing our podcast, or a great launch strategy. I want to be the first person that pops in your head when you think about podcasts. You're like, I wonder what Krystal would say about that. I wonder if she already created a podcast episode about that. I wonder if she has a YouTube video dedicated to this exact thing that I'm trying to walk through right now. Maybe she has an awesome tutorial. Those are the things that I want my audience to think about me. And the only way that that can actually happen is if I'm consistent with my content, consistent with my messaging, consistent with how often I'm showing up on a regular basis. So I told y'all I'm going to share some quotes that I found. And by the way, I found these on Brainy Quote because I know some people will see a quote like shared somewhere and they're like, that's not actually who said that. Like, check your resources. So I'm not saying that I know all of these are true to exactly who said them first. These are the quotes that I found on Brainy Quotes. Okay. So don't come after me. Don't come after me saying you need to do your research. I found these on Brainy Quotes, and it's really more about like what the message is. And if you want to correct me, if you want to fact check me, that's fine. I'm all for it. And I will go down the rabbit hole and do more research. But I really was looking for really inspirational quotes that had to do with consistency and how we can all show up better for our podcast. So trust is built with consistency. And this was Lincoln Chaffee who said this. And I love that trust is built with consistency because it's so true. It's so true. And I'm going to give you some dumb analogies here, but it's what I do, right? It's the metaphors, the analogies that don't make any sense. That's what you love. I know that's what it is. Starbucks. Okay. This is a really dumb one to go with, but it's what we're going to talk about because most of you probably like Starbucks. Even if you only have it once a month, if you have it every single day, or you have it once a year, you know that when you go to any Starbucks, wherever it is, hopefully it's going to be the same whether you get it in Houston, Texas, or Colorado, or California, or Vermont, or wherever you are visiting a Starbucks. The idea is it's going to be consistent with.
Okay, that was so good and so fun to listen to in just a few minutes, but you could tell both of our podcasters are so good at what they do, and you can hear the enthusiasm that they share with listeners. I'm going to pass this off to Kelly, but Krystal, round of applause, Zoom round of applause, please, for Krystal. That was awesome. Krystal, thank you for that. Passing it off to my colleague, Kelly.
All right, so before we delve into all of the questions that I know you all have, I'm so glad we have these excellent resources with us here today. But I wanted to dive in a little bit and hear from them, sort of their origin stories in terms of podcasting. How did you all get started? Like, where did this all begin? So I'd love to hear from both of you. I don't know, Jordan, since we heard your podcast first, if you could just tell us a little bit about how it all started.
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been listening to podcasts for a really, really, really long time. I discovered them when I was just working at an accounting firm and just killing time basically in my ears while I did some bookkeeping. But I got my kids into podcasting and they love to listen to things as they're going to sleep, and they wanted like bedtime stories, but all the bedtime stories were really cheerful like this. And they were also like 7 minutes long. And my kids don't go to bed that fast. And so I just kind of did the thing that any foolish person would do and said, I can just do it myself. How hard can it be? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to make the one I need. And so, yeah, so a year and a half later, now it's like my job somehow.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it all makes sense now. Like, as I was listening to that, I was like imagining me as a kid, like falling asleep, like perfect. It's also the librarian in me, the children's librarian working with youth. All right, Krystal, let's hear from you.
Yes, thank you all so much for having me. And thank you, Jordan, for asking me to come and hang out with y'all. I love podcasting. I have been listening to podcasts for a really long time. I was kind of have the typical entrepreneur story where I was in the corporate world and then I decided to quit for personal reasons. And it was really to stay at home with my kids. And it's funny because I was actually telling, David and Kelly the other day, whenever we met in preparation to do this, that whenever I was staying at home, I've always been on this journey of like figuring out, what am I supposed to do? Like if I'm not working at corporate and I'm at home with my kids, what does that definition look like? And I turned to the library. Actually, we lived in a really small town and we had a community library. There was no city money, no state funding. Like, I don't even know how it was operating, to be quite honest with you. But I turned to the library because they had story time and I could take my kids there. So this is a really like just fun way to kind of go back to my roots with what we're doing here tonight. But I started writing. I started exploring other things that I could do as a mom while I was still at home with my kids. And then I tried blogging, didn't work. I always say I'm a very unsuccessful blogger. But then I fell into podcasting. I had seen one of my mentors start a podcast and I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. And so now I teach entrepreneurs how to get their podcast up and running. And I love it so much. It is so much fun for me. So Jordan and I are like super excited to answer y'all's podcasting questions. So don't hold back.
Thank you. Before we get into that, one more question for each of you. So what does a day in the life of a pro podcaster such as yourself, what does it look like? If you could just tell us a little bit. I guess we'll go back to Jordan for this.
Yeah, so my day is going to look a little bit different than Krystal's because of the format of my podcast and the nature of it. So I usually start out just first thing in the morning, sitting down with my coffee and answering emails or bookmarking things. And then I will sit down and open up my spreadsheet of my episodes and either work on writing or adapting stories, or I will record an episode, or I will be editing an episode. And then I usually carve out about an hour to just browse music. I just love browsing music, and that I have to do a lot of homework for mine.
Awesome. Sort of like the librarian researching things.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. Yeah, I used to be a librarian. So actually, I think I might have had a job. What are you, Kelly?
Children's librarian. Well, I do a lot of things actually, but yeah.
Yeah, I was the youth services. So I think we were in the same shoes.
Except for these workshops, I'm really excited that I'm here and working with some a little bit older than I'm used to, but I love working with people of all ages. I didn't mean to say any of you are old. I'm just used to working with like 3-year-olds. So this is a nice change.
I feel that.
Yeah. What about you, Crystal? What does a day look like for you doing all this podcasting?
Well, like Jordan said, it's going to be different between my podcast and her podcast, and even anybody else that does what I do in teaching podcasting. And I think that that is part of the beauty of it is there are no rules, there's guidelines. That's what I tell people. Everyone's like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be and it should be this way. And I'm like, those are just guidelines. Like rules are meant to be broken here. Okay. Like this is just how I run my business and my podcast. So every week does look a little bit different depending on if we're in the middle of a promotional season with my business or an affiliate program that I'm working with. But typically it does look similar to Jordan's in that I'm doing research, I'm doing homework, I'm recording, I'm editing. I'm a big fan of batching content. And so I will take a few hours out of my week. I still have a 5-year-old that's home with me 3 days a week. So he only goes to a Mother's Day Out program twice a week from 9 to 2. And so on those days, I am like, I'm going to get as much done as I can without like any disturbances from a 5-year-old busting in my office saying, can I have some more goldfish? Which happens very often. If you've listened to my podcast, you've probably heard it before, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But yeah, it just changes week to week, and we can, if anybody has any questions about what that would look like, I can answer those. But it's mostly just really trying to understand my listeners and how I can best serve them. So.
All right, thank you. With that, I think I'll hand it back to David.
Okay, so we're gonna.
I think I'll take it over.
Yeah, you got it, Abraham. Crystal and Jordan, thank you for this kind of impromptu Q&A as we move on.
All right, so we're going to jump on over to the Q&A section. So if you would like to ask our lovely hosts some questions, please raise your hand and we will select some people and we'll get going from here.
Are you going to read the questions that we sent in or discussed? Is anyone going to do that just so we don't overlap?
Who's got the questions, Kelly or David?
They're on our shared document. I put the questions Grace shared on there. But feel free, Grace, if there's because I know you had a lot of questions, which is awesome. If there is a question that I don't say or that we miss, please definitely chime in. I know you're good at that.
Okay.
All right. So we'll start off with Barb's raised hand here. So Barb, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Great, thanks. Hi, guys. I asked this kind of before in a very long-winded way. I'll try to make it shorter. My question was, how do you juice your, I'm thinking in terms of Google presence and that kind of thing. So how do you get your podcast above the fray? What are the things that affect the way it's seen when I go and log in without knowing who you guys are, for example? How would I find you without purposefully looking? And how do they decide who they're going to feature? All these different guys that are hosting your podcasts. So what juices what greases the wheels, I guess, is the question. And how do you get the equivalent of organic Facebook feed distribution?
Do you want me to take that one, Jordan?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but I kind of feel like this might be your domain.
No, go ahead. You share first.
No, you go first. I don't want to know. I shan't.
Well, like Jordan said, it really all depends on what your goals are with your podcast. Because when I am helping entrepreneurs specifically, because that is who I serve. And these are podcasters that are entrepreneurs. They have a business aspect of their podcast. They are monetizing their show, or that is one of their main goals. What I tell them to focus on is, how can you get in front of the most people who are your target audience? So we don't necessarily focus on, let's get as many downloads, let's get in front of as many people, because that might like kind of push you up in the beginning. But at the end of the day, if you're not serving the people who will continue to like bake your podcast into their weekly or daily habits, like I listen to podcasts all the time. And Jordan, I know she's told me she listens to hours and hours of podcasts. I think she actually listens to more than me, but she does those, like she chooses which podcasts to listen to because she enjoys them and continues to listen to them over and over again. So while I think that, you know, getting on New and Noteworthy, it's getting a lot harder than it used to be. But if that is your goal, then what you would have to do is have an established platform with thousands of followers ready to listen as soon as you launch, which for most new entrepreneurs or new podcasters, it's not really possible anymore. I think that it would have been a few years ago, but I mean, there's 2 million podcasts now. And so I don't want to say that to discourage anyone. I just say that to kind of make the mental shift of like, instead of just like that being your only goal, how can you reach your ideal listeners and the most of them that you can from the beginning? But Jordan, share what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on Apple, and my so the thing is that Apple isn't really like making like huge strides to really up the value of their podcast platform. They were just kind of like, we were here first, and then they're like chilling in the backyard while like everyone's putting in the hard work. And so there's other podcast apps that are really creeping up. They're actually like Spotify has surpassed Apple as the top podcast app. Yeah. So I just don't think that New and Noteworthy is actually worth it. And I've actually heard from several podcasters that have been on New and Noteworthy, and it does this thing where it like boosts them the first week and then it just drops because their content wasn't relevant for people. So there's that for that. I think it's silly. I think it's just so silly to be on New and Noteworthy. And honestly, I've seen some podcasts that were established in like 2006 on New and Noteworthy, and my eyes nearly rolled in the back of my head. So, yeah, that's my thought on that. Second off, the thing about podcasts and getting listeners and getting in front of people, the difficult thing is that you have to think about conversion. And people who are non-podcast listeners, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it is darn near impossible to turn non-podcast listeners or people who aren't really educated on what podcasts are into your listeners. So one of the best things to do to get in front of your market is going to be to reach out to some podcasts, maybe like interview style podcasts or something like that, that are within your niche. So let's say that you do, I don't know, a gardening podcast, and there's a guy who is on he has a beekeeping podcast, and you go on there and you talk about what flowers are the best for the bees, or, you know, whatever. I'm throwing something. I have nothing to add for agriculture. I don't know anything about it. But if you find podcasts that might be somewhere in the realm of your topic, that is the best way to get more of an audience, because you're going to be put in front of their listeners. And it's not like you're put in front of their listeners for like 15 seconds like you would be on social media, right? You're there for however long the episode is, and you have that entire episode to win them over and say, hey, I know what I'm doing, or hey, I'm really likable, you should come listen to this. So I think that's the best way to do it, really, aside from the Google SEO and stuff like that. I think that's kind of a down the road sort of thing.
You know, the other thing I find interesting, because I just started doing podcasts recently, and the thing I find interesting, I always wondered about, I'm very visual, so I've always wondered about whether or not I would miss the visual. Like listening to a Dateline podcast just didn't make sense to me. Well, because I'd rather watch it on TV. And actually, so I did one just as an experiment, part of this class. And I kept losing track of who was who because I couldn't relate the face to the names and all that stuff. But even more interesting, as you were talking, it dawned on me. I have an Android phone. I have iPads. I have Windows machines. So I have all these different podcast apps. I have Amazon Prime. And they all want me to listen to the same podcasts, which is kind of crazy because what I find myself doing is ending up going, oh yeah, I like that one over there. So now I have it on my phone. I have it in 14 different places. And it almost doesn't make sense. It's all because it's all duplicative, really. And that must be a challenge. I don't even know what the implications. I'm kind of thinking out loud here for you guys or for us guys, if we want to go down this path about how to manage all of that. I don't even know, or is it not an issue to you? Do you not worry about that?
I don't worry about it because the thing is those podcasts, like the ones that are just so heavily featured on all these platforms, they are owned by big networks, and it's typically already established networks. And the thing is that I know some of these networks will spend like $100,000 producing a season of a podcast. And then I find out that I actually have more listeners than they do. And I did it for like nothing, So I don't think it matters. I just really don't. That's
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and you have a particular appeal. Both of you do actually, which says something as well.
Thank you.
I mean, it's close to my bedtime too. No, I wanted to hear more of both of you. And the interesting thing about yours was it was like a meditation. The combination of all of it. It was mind blowing. It was very relaxing. And I was sitting here going, okay, near my bedtime too, Jordan. Krystal, I think you commented on that. Yeah.
Well, I wanted
Thank you for your question, Barb. We're going to move on over to Bebe next.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just so everybody gets a chance to go.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Abraham. This is my first one. I missed the previous episode. So hopefully, if it's covered, I apologize. But some of my favorite podcasters, for example, Sam Harris, he has both a YouTube channel and also, his podcast streams, whatever. So technically, how do you integrate or streamline both? And also in terms of marketing promotion, not him, he's already well established. For someone who's might be new, how do you, in terms of the marketing and distribution, how do you optimize your strategy between the two?
Well, I'll take this one only because I get this a lot. I get this question all the time is how can I live stream, repurpose? I want to be on Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Pinterest, all the places, every single platform. And I have talked to so many social media strategists, right? Because I'm not going to claim any kind of social media expert title. That's not me. No. But I will say that if you try to show up in all the places all at once, all the time, it's a very quick way to burn out and to not have fun anymore. And one of the things that is like a principle within my business, my podcast, everything that I do is creativity and fun. Otherwise, it's not worth it to me anymore. Like whenever I have a day or I'm just like, okay, this, I don't like this anymore, then something is like red flag. I need to see what that is, because I've actually tried to do a live stream podcast. I've tried to do YouTube videos that I strip the audio out, and I've tried all the different ways. But what I have found, and this is just my personal experience, is showing up to each platform the way that it was meant to be shown up for. So a great example is if you wanted to do YouTube and a podcast, my recommendation would be to create the long form podcast first, because it's easiest, right? You don't have to get ready. You don't have to worry about a camera or anything like that. You can just record your podcast and think of that like the first draft of a video. So you take that podcast episode, strip out the pieces that you think will work really well in a video, and then go and record a video that could be the exact same piece of content or something very similar, but maybe a little bit shorter, maybe tighter and more concise in a way that your audience would appreciate it. And then from there, a higher level strategy is to take clips of that and share that on social media, because now you have something to post about. So it's a lot easier if you start with the longest form of the content and then pare it down and piece it down and share it on all the different platforms that way. But I'll just be really honest, when it comes to social media, sticking to one main platform is very beneficial, especially if you're just getting started and you haven't grown a following on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Just choosing one and knowing that that's where your ideal listener is going to be super helpful. So does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I know that you have to focus and can't spread too thin. I wasn't thinking of all of the platforms, but just between sometimes audio, perhaps mostly audio, but sometimes video as well. And to do it, and so if it's interview, it may not work to do a draft version because it involves another person. It has to be one go. So how do you, if it's interview, most of the time audio is okay, but the nature of what I'm thinking of, there would be visual components, for example, featuring an artist's work, so then the video would be better. And unfortunately, I can't just do a draft with that person and have her do it again. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I would recommend, I have 2 software platforms I would recommend. One of them is Squadcast. And this is one where it's you and the other person. You're not live streaming it on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere else. It's just y'all are kind of in a closed Zoom room like this, but it produces very high quality audio and video. So I would recommend Squadcast. And then the other one is, if you did want to live stream it out to your community on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, then I would recommend StreamYard. Because with StreamYard, what you can do is you can live stream it wherever you're going live, and so you have that video component, but then when you're finished, you can click a button and just download the audio. If you don't want to keep the video for other purposes, you're like, okay, it's on my YouTube channel, it's out there, I don't need the video, I can just click a button, download the audio, and then use that as your podcast. Does that help?
Sure. Yeah, I actually don't care live streaming that much, as long as there's a video on demand afterwards, it's okay. So you're saying that Squadcast.
Yeah, Squad, SQA. So hang on, SQUAD.
Links are in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that would be better than Zoom, you're saying?
You could do Zoom as well. Zoom is great. Squadcast, you will have to pay for it. Zoom, depending on what kind of account you have. But Squadcast does prioritize higher audio quality than some of the other options like Zoom does. So
right, but okay, got it. But then when it comes to distribution, is there a way, do you have to post in each podcast and YouTube, or is there a way to shoot it out to both in terms of the workflow?
I know that I think that there are hosting providers that do that, but I think they're very, very expensive. The one that Jordan and I use, Buzzsprout, they don't allow for video and audio. It's just audio. Okay. So there are some workarounds, but I think that they're going to be pretty pricey.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for the question and the very awesome answer. Let's move on over to Cindy's question. Go ahead, Cindy.
Thanks. So I have 2 questions. One is about voice. I think sometimes content can be really interesting, but if a voice is too nasally or hyper, and if they say too much, I get lost. And so I'm wondering if you know of any even podcasters or someone who does voice coaching for podcasts. Because I think, you don't want to be, I think for me too, naturalness is really good, but you also have to have a script, but then you don't want to sound like you're reading off the script. And the other is just, if you two could just say maybe one mistake you made that you learned from, that we can learn from, so we don't make the same mistake. Thanks.
I think in terms of voice, I think if you're concerned, it sounds to me like you're concerned that your voice is going to be annoying or inadequate in some way. Is that right? Yeah. No, the thing is that you can't really change your voice. But you can practice. And yeah, I've heard that asked before, and yeah, you can't change your voice. I mean, there's some podcasters that I love, and they're just like these men with like these shrill, like laughing voices, and everyone just like comments that they hate it so much. And I love it. I live for it. I want to hear that shrill sound in the morning. So I think it just depends on personal preference, and you can't please everybody. So it's kind of hard. What I can say is, as far as just making sure that your voice is the best that it can be, which sounds really stupid right now because I'm like, because it's like the end of the day and I've yelled at my kids enough that I'm like a little hoarse. But some things that you can do prior to recording is make sure that you hydrate. So just make sure that you drink like a nice glass of water like an hour before. And make sure that's room temperature water, because if it's cold water, it actually will freeze up your vocal cords a little bit and it makes it a little bit tighter. And the other thing is, that's my favorite, is throat coat tea. It's like that herbal tea. I don't know. They have like gypsy cold care and stuff, but throat coat tea I love. So I always have like a glass of room temperature water and then throat coat tea. And then also to get rid of like mouth clicks, like the little like dry mouth sounds that people sometimes don't get out of podcasts, is you take a bite out of a green apple and there's something about the acidity in it that really helps with that. So those are my quick and dirty tips to like make your voice as good as it can be. And I think getting the ums and stuff out just comes in time. It just comes with practice. And in the meantime, you can just delete it out and no one has to know.
I do want to say one thing though. When I get nervous, my voice goes up. It sounds different.
Me too.
Yeah. And so I think we can't be aware of that. Even if you're recording your voice, to be aware that your voice does go up. It kind of, goes up.
I think it's kind of like the thing where you practice in front of a mirror and you feel really stupid doing it, but it works. So I think like just doing a trial run kind of thing, like maybe you can practice getting used to the microphone while you record your podcast trailer or something like that. I cannot tell you what a deep pit in my stomach I had probably the first like 6 episodes that I did. And I felt like I was about to like get on stage at the Met. I don't know why. No one was around. I was going to edit it. I could delete it if I want to. It didn't matter. And I just felt like sick to my stomach, like physically ill. So I feel like it's just something you get over. And that's kind of the cool thing about it, is you can edit it out if it sounds stupid. Like,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I totally agree to add on to what Jordan said. I have a friend who's a speaking coach, and that's what she says. She's like, you just got to word vomit like all the time, whether it's speaking in the shower. She was like, you literally have to talk to yourself, and actually this is, a great plug for Jordan and what she does, but she was saying that even reading stories to children is a great way to practice, because you do these inflections in your voice and then you get serious when you're talking about something, and all that really helps you just kind of beef up and exercise your voice. But I think another thing is just like Jordan said, practice. And I am a big fan of, I don't do a ton of editing for my show. I know Jordan, like her show is very produced, and like the way, like the music and the audio, like everything syncs up really well. If you listen to my show, the expectations may be like, oh, the bar is pretty low for Krystal. And that's just simply because I've been doing it for so long that I don't make a lot of the same mistakes that I did when I first started. So back to your question, like what's a mistake that we made from the very beginning? I I think for me, it was trying to edit out myself so much where I sounded like a robot. I really did. Like I cut out huge chunks of my audio because, oh my gosh, I said the word, I got to cut it out. And I said this and I said that. But in my mind, I just adapted my podcast to be like you and I were sitting here having coffee. I couldn't edit that out. I couldn't like fix the word flub. Like I tripped over my words and I said something dumb. I call it what it is. And my audience really responds to that. And they say, oh, she's human. She's just a real person on the other side of that microphone. And I think that it helps me make that connection with my audience that much faster. But that's not for everybody. That's just how I run my show. And it's how I choose to do my podcast. So just know that you'll get better as you keep going. But Jordan, I want to hear what your mistake was. What's one mistake you learned from?
My mistake was not having a couple episodes in my pocket before launch date. And I've been catching up ever since. And I'll like get a little bit caught up where I get like 2 weeks or like a month ahead. Like I have these episodes like uploaded, scheduled, ready to go. And I'm totes gonna just like stay on top of it because there's all these podcasters that have they'll be like talking and they're like, oh yeah, like you'll probably hear this in 3 months from now. And I'm just like, how do they do that? So I did the thing where it's like, just put yourself out there, like just hit that publish button. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have, because every time I get caught up, like some crazy life emergency happens and then I get like back behind again. So I'm kind of in that spot right now where I just feel like I'm like constantly recording and I'm having audio issues and there's all this stuff going on. And I'm working until like 1 o'clock in the morning because I didn't have those extra episodes in my pocket. So that's my big woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Cindy. So we have a couple of written questions. I'll just toss these to you, Jordan and Krystal. The 2 questions are advertisements the best way to make money? And also, what about logo and merchandising? So however you guys want to answer this.
I have some thoughts on both of those. Okay. So advertising is quite good. There's different types of advertising, which I don't know if you guys went over, but it's the CPM versus CPA, which is like getting paid per how many downloads you have versus getting paid for how many people like purchase the item. So if you have a small audience that is just like devoted to you and they're going to take your word, like if you're an expert on office supplies and you're like, this swingline stapler is the best stapler ever and you should buy it. And they go, yeah, I should buy that because I trust your opinion. And then they go buy it and you make a bunch of money. That's great. You know, even if you have like 10 people, you know, and then there's other people probably closer to me. Like I have a very, uninvolved audience. Like I cannot get them to like do anything, but there's a lot of them. And so for me, it's the cost per like however many thousand downloads. That's the way that I do it. And that's what works best for me. But yeah, it just kind of depends on your audience. And honestly, you have to kind of like test that out. But starting off, my big thing was Patreon. And so I had set up Patreon prior to launching. And honestly, between my mom and like one of my friends I went to high school with, I was able to cover the cost of like hosting fees in my first month, which was great. And then it just kind of grew because I just said like, yeah, if you pledge this much a month, you get like bonus episodes or whatever. So I think they're both really good. And I don't see why you can't do both. There's no reason why you can't say like, hey, if you get value from this, like donate to Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal or make monthly pledges and get something in return here, and then go on to your ad read or whatever you want to do. Yeah. And then as far as I have feelings about merch, I think merch when you're first starting out is kind of a little bit of a waste of time. Just because it's one of those things where like if it's not big enough to have a fan base, like wait until you have a fan base and have people asking for things. That's kind of what I learned. I did a whole like t-shirt line for like sleeping, and my mom was the only person that bought it. She bought a t-shirt and she was the only one, and I wasted all that time making it. So I think it's one of those things where you have to wait until people start asking. But yeah, that's what I think on merch. I wonder what Krystal's thoughts are on all that.
Yeah. So, since a lot of the people that I speak to directly have some sort of business tied to their podcast, like it's kind of like it's their advertising dollars is their podcast, and it's their way of getting what they do in front of more people, whether it's by paid advertising or organic search, SEO, whatever that may be. But for people that are just getting started, they're like, well, I want to have a business with my podcast, but I don't yet. Similar to what Jordan was saying, Patreon is a great place to start. I also love affiliate marketing. It's actually been something that has helped me sustain my business before I was making money to do some of the other fun things that I'm doing now. I got started being an Amazon affiliate. And I was talking about podcasting. And so I started recommending microphones and equipment and saying, hey, you like the way this $20 microphone sounds? You can go buy one too. It's on Amazon. Here's the link. And, just like a side note to anything affiliate related, there are some FTC guidelines that you have to follow. You have to disclaim that, hey, if you click on this on your website or wherever you post it, this is an affiliate link. So I just want everybody to know that, that there are some guidelines to follow. But affiliate marketing is fantastic. But similar to what Jordan was saying about merch, it's like, I totally agree. I'm not a fan of inventory. I've never had merch for my show. And it's something I've talked about, like in theory, like one day that'd be fun, but I haven't explored it because I agree with what Jordan was saying. Like, I don't think it's worth my time right now. Maybe in the future when people are asking me, begging me, can we have a coffee cup or, a journal or something? Then I'll explore it more. But something that I like to tell podcasters to do is once you've been doing it for 3 months, 6 months, a year, wherever you feel comfortable with, I encourage you to create a digital product that is specific to who is listening to your show. So I have people in my audience that are personal finance people, like they're financial planners. I have real estate agents. I have people that are from all walks of business. And I say, why can't you create a course that is related to what your podcast is about, whether it's helping them get their financial situation together, or it's trying to baby step them into working with you as a real estate agent, whatever that would look like. I really encourage you to just go deep on understanding your listeners, and they will tell you what they want from you. And then I have people reach out to me all the time and say, how can I support you? So that's really cool to have the Patreon option or buy me a coffee or something like that, where you can direct them like, hey, you can donate or pledge $5 here and help me cover my expenses. So those are a few ways to make money with a podcast.
Great, thank you for the awesome and detailed answers. So we have a question in the chat for Jordan, and it's about the sources for your music and stories. Are they public domain, or do you buy some of the rights for those?
Okay. So I bootstrapped my podcast to death. So the first thing that I did, my podcast is very music heavy. So I feel like I'm a little bit of an expert on this. Free music. Here we go. So there is freemusicarchive.org. And that is my number one. It is so good. And pretty much all of the songs are Creative Commons licensed, but you have to attribute the artist. So that could be saying their name in the credit, like, the song in this episode was Good Morrow by Dear Gravity, or the theme song of this podcast is whatever by whatever. And then you can also put the attribution in the show notes. So in your podcast description. So yeah, you can do that. So yeah, Free Music Archive. I know people swear by the YouTube thing. It's like, I don't know, but I don't feel like that is so great. I think they may have added more things, but it's the same deal where it's Creative Commons, and so you have to attribute it. It's I think it's just YouTube Creative Commons. View Commons Music. Yeah, like if you just Google Creative Commons, there's also Pixabay, Pixabay.com. That's another thing where it's Creative Commons, and they actually have a music tab on there that you can use. And then I know some people swear by Audio Jungle as well. I have not used Audio Jungle though. But yeah, my favorite is Free Music Archive because you can have it sorted by genre or things like that. And they have so much music. Now, mind you, you will be sitting down, like make an evening out of it. You will be sitting down for like 3 hours browsing music because they have so much, but Free Music Archive is by far the best. They have such great composers and indie musicians and stuff. And it is like just amazing. So when I started making enough money, I moved on to storyblocks.com. And they have a thing where you can license music from them, and their library is just amazing. It's so good. So that's a thing where you can do like 1 month. And so you sign up for 1 month, and I think it's like $15 or $30 a month. And you get so many downloads, and you can just go through and download as much as you want and then cancel your subscription. So it's just one of those things where like once you license it from them, it's licensed for life. And I love Storyblocks. Or maybe you can go to storyblocks.com, and you can also go to audioblocks.com. It's one of those weird things. And then the one I graduated to just recently was artlist.io. I don't really recommend this unless your podcast is very music heavy because it is expensive. It was over $200 for the year, and it really hurt, but the music is just so rich and gorgeous. So if you're doing like a high production type thing, might be worth it. I personally don't think it's really worth it. I just kind of went there to like save myself some time because their stuff's just really good. So yeah, that's my free music. And with the stories, I do use Project Gutenberg sometimes to find things in the public domain. And the great thing about public domain is you can alter the stories however you want. You can redistribute them. You can do whatever you want with them. So a lot of times I'll do adaptations, and or sometimes you can steal a plot from a story. Disney does this all the time. It's fine, guys. But you can steal a plot from a public domain story and alter it to be something else. So like maybe instead of like Romeo and Juliet, it's like a raccoon in a cactus. So yeah, that's the great thing with like public domain. But yeah, projectgutenberg.org is fantastic for free books.
There's a saying that my buddy has. It's don't steal like a thief, steal like an artist. And I feel that applies right there.
It's true.
So true. Krystal, do you have any input into any of this music buying stuff?
Yeah, for people that aren't going to be heavy on music. So for what I've done is I recorded an audio clip, and then I put music behind it, and then I saved it as its own like MP3 or WAV file, and I drop that into every single episode. So it's what I call my main theme. Like it's the same 15 to 20 seconds you'll hear in every single episode, and that's really the only music that I have at that part. And then at the very end is kind of like part of the outro. And I have purchased, so I've hired someone, I hired a freelance music producer off of Fiverr.com. So Fiver. Yeah. Y'all, I cannot spell. It's too late for me. I can't spell, but it's Fiverr with 2 R's. But I've hired someone on there for like $30 and they, created this piece of music that was really awesome. But in hindsight, it was a lot of back and forth. Like he sampled some stuff for me and was like, hey, do you like this? Do you like that? And I didn't pay a lot for it, but at the end of the day, I wasn't in love with it. So it was just kind of my way to tiptoe into the world of podcasting. I eventually, Jordan mentioned it earlier, but I went to Audio Jungle and I found some music that I'm currently using. I like it a lot more. I think that in the future, it would be really fun to hire a musician and produce something collaboratively with me, but it's expensive. Music is very expensive. So I love going the route of, copyright free or, royalty free and stuff that, you won't get in trouble. I'm very risk averse in everything that I do, but, or just doing it very affordable, very affordable. You don't have to spend a ton of money, especially if you're not going to be music heavy with your podcast. So, but do take some time to find music that goes with your vibe, because I know when I listen to a music or a podcast and they have really good music, I'm like, oh, I like this. This is going to be good. I like the energy that's happening here. And so I would hope that you would want to do that with your listeners as well.
I have to hop in just for like a hot second because I totally forgot that the podcast host, they released some podcast theme packs and they're so good. It has intro music, outro, transition, and it's all like these theme packs. So if you're just looking for something that's like good, but you don't want to put in the work, these are excellent. I went through and like listened to them and stuff, and they're really good. So if you're just looking for something simple, but all kind of meshes together and you want like transitions into like your ad reads or transitions to a different section, this is amazing. And I'm super excited. I wish that there was like an entire website dedicated to this kind of thing. Maybe we should do that, Krystal. I don't know.
All right, so we're going to fish for a couple more questions here. If anybody's got something, you can go ahead and unmute your mic.
Grace, go for it.
This is it's kind of an odd question. Well, it's not an odd question. I'm curious how much money you make doing what you do. Like Krystal, I'm curious, how much do you charge an hour for consulting? And then do you make any money off your podcast through affiliates or advertising? And like, have you been increasing your income each year? And approximately what do you make? And same question really for Jordan. I'm just curious, how are you making money? What are you doing to make that money? And how are you increasing it, if you don't mind? And you don't have to answer, and you don't have to be embarrassed, because I was telling people before, I always ask influencers of Instagram, and I find out a lot of them haven't made more than $10, and they've done so much work. So that's why I'm asking that. I'm not in this for the money. If anything, I'm into it to document my own stories. And also my daughter has a YouTube that I think would be beneficial. Like it's similar to yours, but it's Spanish with Sheridan. So it's book reading and singing for parents who can't read to their children in Spanish. So once I get a logo, we're going to launch that with a bonfire shop. And I don't want to take too much time because I really want to hear about the money. Thank you.
Krystal, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, sure. So the way that I monetize my show and I make money in my business is I have a lot of avenues, because I'm a very big believer in don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I had never really started my podcast with the idea that my podcast is going to make me money immediately right away. I knew that I was building something for the future. And I have been doing this. It'll be 3 years in June since I launched my first podcast. I've since rebranded and changed directions, but I'm just now hitting like those figures of being able to monetize based on how many listeners I have. So I've had to get creative, again, going back to the affiliate marketing, creating products for my audience. Like I've written a book, so I have Amazon sales. I have affiliate promotions. I like just in affiliates alone last year, I probably made 10 to 15 grand, specifically from just affiliates that I've worked with. There's different kind of companies that I worked with. Like we've done partner promotions, and then there's other like little nickel and dime promotionals that I've done. And then from creating my own products, last year, I think that we hit double what we did the year before. And that was because my audience is continuing to grow because, again, back to like the long game of podcasting, people may not be like rushing to get your podcast right now. But when people find you, they go and listen to your backlog. They're like, this is so good right now. What else do they have? What else is in like the archives that I can go and discover? And that is an opportunity for you to continue. That's really how you boost those download numbers as you keep going. And it's funny that David shared the consistency episode earlier, because that is like the biggest principle that I just preach to people over and over again is if you stick with that consistency, something that you talked about 2 years ago on your podcast, but you had that affiliate link there, right? Or you on your YouTube channel, all of a sudden you could start seeing money coming from those affiliate links from in the past. So I think that it's really important to just kind of keep your ear to the ground. Like, what do my people want? Do they want me to create a product? Do they want me to just recommend products and services that I love? I mean, y'all, you could literally be blown away by all the affiliate programs that are out there. I mean, if you have a website, who hosts it? There's probably a good chance for you to be an affiliate for them. I know Buzzsprout, the company that Jordan and I use for podcasting, I make money every single month from me just recommending their services to new podcasters. So just kind of take a step back and evaluate, what programs and services do you love and do you use, and how could you relate those to your audience, and start there first and foremost, and then just keep talking about them. Keep talking about them all the time, all the benefits, that why you love those products and services.
Okay, and then just curious about your hourly consulting rate, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I am at $200 an hour, and that may sound really high. And the reason is because I really push people to my course, and I push them that way because $200 an hour really isn't that much money in the realm of how much that would actually cost me to sit down, because whenever it's just a one-on-one conversation with someone, I'm actually putting in probably 4 or 5 hours of work behind the scene. So I started at $50 an hour, but I've had people like, constantly asking. And so I have really trimmed up how much one-on-one consulting that I do, where I don't really even take clients typically. I push them to my digital course. And I just see that continuing to rise in the future. So if anybody has any kind of consultancy that they're running and they're doing, I would highly recommend, especially if you're just getting started, offering those services for free and being able to use that as testimonials on your podcast. Like, I worked with Grace, and these are the results that we got for her, and they were incredible. And if you want to chat with me about consulting, then go to this website or go check it out here. But yeah, that's another great a great strategy for monetization.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I do appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and mine is going to be so much different than Krystal's, because we're in two completely different realms of podcasting. So like I said, my first step into monetization was Patreon. And like I said, I just started that before even launching, and friends and family kind of helped shove me up the hill to get the podcast done. And then as I built up bonus episodes and stuff, I started getting more subscribers to Patreon. And I
think some of us don't know fully what is Patreon.
So Patreon is an amazing website where you can actually support creators by pledging a donation, either monthly or per episode, depending on what the creator has set up. I do monthly just because it's easiest.
Like a stream talking a stream? Someone could just sign
Yeah,
up
you
and
can do like a private RSS feed. I do behind the scenes videos. I write thank you cards with little holographic stickers to my listeners. And I also put up just like, I put up bonus episodes every month for the bedtime stories. So, you know, if, and I have you can do different tiers. So I have a $1 tier, and that's for my listeners. Like, I actually have some kids that use their allowance for that tier, and it like, it just makes me die. But like, yeah, so I have a $1 tier for people that don't have as much expendable income, and they get a shout out on a bonus episode they get a shout out on the episode, and then they also get a bonus episode each month. And then I have a $5 tier, and the $5 tier gets like that sticker with the card and the shout out, and then like 2 bonus episodes. And then I have $10 which is insane. But I have a $10 tier, and it's like behind the scenes extras on top of everything else. So the best advice I got for Patreon, and I wish I had I'm probably going to add another one just to like test it and see. But the best advice I got for Patreon is make a tier that's higher than you think someone's going to be willing to pay, because you're going to be surprised. And so my like crazy wild one was $10, and I cannot believe how many people are on that now. So it's been like a little over a year, and I'm about consistently at like $250 each month for that. I only have like 70 something patrons. Yeah, thank you. But Patreon added a new feature that was like a freaking game changer, and they added it back in August, and it's annual memberships where you can provide annual membership amounts for a discount. So it's like 16%, which is for the year, 2 months free. So I qualified for that. You have to have like consistent posting and consistent patrons or something. I don't know what their rules are, but I finally qualified for it this month. And I literally made $500 more this month by just staying on the podcast. I know, by just saying on the podcast, you know, hey, I now have annual memberships, and this makes a great gift. And you can get a year's worth of podcasts, like bonus episodes, for $10. And it is really cool. So I cannot recommend Patreon enough. And then with the sponsorships, like I said, I do the CPM model, which is just like how many listeners you have. And I get sponsorships through podcorn.com as well as AdvertiseCast. And you have to have, I think it's a baseline of like 5,000 downloads in 30 days to do AdvertiseCast. Like there's some that are like that where it's a little bit harder to get in and it's down the road, but Podcorn does not have a baseline like that. I mean, you can have like 50 listeners and use Podcorn, and it's a platform where you can find sponsors and connect with them and send them a thing and say like, hey, I think we'd be a really good fit because, you know, whatever. But, and you set the price for that. Mm-hmm.
What is CPM?
CPM is, so it's cost per mille, which is cost per 1,000. And so what you do is you say like, you know, to advertise on my podcast, it's going to be $25 CPM, which means $25 per 1,000 downloads. And so let's say that you get like, I don't do math. Let's say that you get 4,000 downloads. And so you can ask for $100 per thing. So I'm finally worked up enough to where I'm getting probably about like $800 per episode just on the sponsorships. Like I do a max of 2 sponsorships, and I won't do more just because I can't do interrupting ones like the ones in the middle, because that would be very rude of me to do that in the middle of my podcast. So yeah, that's kind of like what I've worked up to. It took me forever to work up the courage to even get a sponsor. I waited until I was like way past the monetization threshold. I really did, because I was just really scared of like failing and stuff. But I wish I had started the sponsorships and like just reaching out to people and asking back when I had like 500 downloads an episode.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. I'm going to throw this over to Kelly, and Kelly's going to finish us off right now.
Yes, thank you everyone for your questions. I feel like we learned so much even in just asking these questions here. One last thing before we say goodbye to our guests this evening, Jordan, Krystal, again, thank you so much. For folks who might want to like check you out online, we'd love to hear if there's a good way that we can either find you online or I don't know if we are able to connect with you directly, but if you could just let us know for you, what's the best way that we can look you up?
Yeah, I know that I saw some of the URLs being posted earlier, but the best way to connect with me is you can go to krystalproffitt.com. It's my website, or reach out to me on Instagram. Like, I love a good DM, and you can say, hey, this is like, I'm coming from the San Mateo Library talk, and like, this is what I learned. Like, tell me your number one takeaway. I would love to get a DM from you, and we can connect there on Instagram. And y'all go listen to Jordan's podcast. Like, I am tempted to go and like, it's 9:00 now in Texas. So I'm like, I'm about to go put on the Dreamful podcast and check it out and let Jordan like whisper me into my sleepy dreams. But yeah, that's where you can connect with me.
Thank you. Jordan, what about you?
Krystal, you make me sound so creepy. So you can find me at dreamfulstories.com. And I have links to my Facebook, Instagram, my emails on there, and just whatever. But if you have podcasting stuff, like obviously Krystal's going to be the go-to. And yeah, I have to plug her podcast too, because it's amazing, especially, I don't know, it's for every level of podcaster, really. So it's good content. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know it's getting late where you are, so if you have to jump off, thanks again, everyone, if you want to.
Round of applause for Krystal and Jordan.
Thank you all for having
Thank you,
us.
everybody.
This was a lot of fun.
Yes.
So much fun.
Thanks a lot, guys. You were great.
Didn't come through. But yeah, I meant to share in the chat just now. If you can give us some feedback about this program, especially today, we had, such wonderful guests with us. So when you have a moment, please fill out our survey. I'll pass it back to Abraham. I don't know if you have any last words here.
Things in there.
All right. Well, I want to say my final goodbyes. I want to thank our guests, and I want to thank you all. We'll communicate with our attendees via email, and I'll pass it off to Abraham before we get on out of here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Jordan and Krystal. You guys were amazing, and you were very knowledgeable and very kind. So thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And thank you all for joining us, people in the audience. Hopefully we've inspired you to go out and make your own podcasts. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks for a great series, you guys from the library. You wouldn't believe what these guys did over the last 4 weeks. Seriously, you guys did an incredible job. I was just telling somebody that